Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to liveFEED here at FEED Media Arts Center in Erie, Pennsylvania. Today's show is directed by Benton C. Bainbridge, and curated by Lisa Austin. Our performance today will start with Cee Williams. Grown and rooted in the Erie community, Cee Williams describes himself as a grateful son, brother, cousin, and friend. A spoken word artist, Cee's poems have appeared in numerous collections and anthologies online and in print. He's the founder of the former Erie Poets Hall that ran from 2010 to 2017. He also founded Poets Hall Press, an entity that continues to publish works by regional, national, and international writers. Cee served as the Erie County Poet Laureate from 2014 to 2016. So please join me in welcoming Cee.
Good afternoon. I appreciate you guys for having me out. Thank you to Lisa, and thanks to FEED. It's Mother's Day, so I brought a collection of poems about my mother. She passed in 2017 after a long battle with Parkinson's disease. I'll touch on that a little bit in the first poem that I share. This was the one poem that I knew I wanted to share. I don't read it very often. Forgive me, I tend to do some voices here and there, so let's see if you'll stick with me. This is Moms and Muhammad Ali. Moms never fought Sonny Liston in Lewiston, or Miami Beach, for that matter. She never battled Frazier in the garden or George in the jungle. Moms rumbles with pill bottles, wrestles with remote controls and telephones. Moms fights with flights of stairs and needing the children she watched over to watch over her now. Mom spars with tears when she isn't asked to watch the great-grands, and every time that great-grand does something new. Those joyful tears, raindrops turn diamonds falling from Mount Zion upon the citizens of El Dorado. Those other tears, just plain cold rain in December. I remember replays of the Champ and Howard Cosell. Howard, I tell you like it is. Without me, you just be a microphone and a mouth. Well, Ali, without me, you just be a mouth. Without moms, I wouldn't be. In this corner, standing 6'3", floats like a butterfly, stings like a bee. 3-time heavyweight champion of the world. And in this corner, standing 4'8" and shrinking a little bit by the day. Moms has Parkinson's disease. It's like watching its progression has been like watching the Holmes fight. Seeing the Champ get beat down for 10 rounds before Dundee threw in the towel. The Champ has Parkinson's disease. His hands that brought men to their knees now tremble the way my mother's do. His dancing feet now shuffle the way my mother's do. Some days, Moms refuses to leave the comfort of the bed. She lifts her head just enough to take the 11 o'clock brown pill. I coax her up by offering up French toast or ham sandwiches or my father's goulash. We watch The Price is Right, Hallmark movies, then 2 hours of Judge Judy. When the news begins, she'll brush her hair and straighten her robe. When my father gets home, they kiss hello, the way they always do, the way they have for 50 years. I shake Pop's hand and kiss Mom's forehead and say, I love you and good night. The night Cassius Clay took the title away from Sonny Liston, he proclaimed himself the greatest. He said, "I shook up the world. I talk to God every day. I must be the greatest." 10 years later, he proved it in Zaire. Mom's rope-a-dope is love. Having her family near, her sisters, my pops, my sisters, her grands, that great grand with the non-stop motor, always doing something new, joyful tears, raindrops turn diamonds, falling from Mount Zion upon these citizens of El Dorado. I was 6 years old the last time Ali fought Leon Spinks, and I really only remember that he won his titles back, and that Moms and Pops were still spade partners. We'll save that story for another time. Moms has patient eyes to watch her shuffling feet, steady hands to guide her to her seat, a loving man stirring big-ass pots of goulash, a son to watch Judge Judy with. I admit it's grown on me. Moms shapes my world. Because of her, I talk to God every day. She must be the greatest. I'm going to read a few poems from one of these little chapbooks. There was a time when I lived off these chapbooks, getting a hold of your 200 closest friends to buy a $5 chapbook every couple of months was a different way of life. This particular one was a lot about my mother. And I'm going to read 3 poems here. I wrote shortly after her passing. The first one is When. When your mother's hand has grown smaller than your own. When the street light narrows and the corner of the room wanes and the ages devour the shadows. When you pray to hospital dust balls and gumballs and hand sanitizer and anything that might make things like they were before. When the nightlight chased away the shadows. And the asphalt street was an ocean. And your mother's hand was vessel enough to ferry you ashore. And this is Dreams. Last night, I was a small boy in the plastic seat of a grocery cart, my feet dangling above the white aisles. My mother smiles as we accept brown paper bundles of bologna and chopped ham from a man with no face. His butcher smock stains a Rorschach butterfly. Her smile fades as I plead for Fruit Loops and Sugar Smacks, and because it is a dream after all, she acquiesced. Blueberry. There is a featureless woman in floral print, grateful for my mother's patronage. There is a Chevy Nova in a shade of blue only found on a 1972 color wheel. There is my mother in the front seat, smoke curling out the open window, driving us home to the old house, big and green like it was before the siding went up. No flower beds, just the pine trees in front that would later swallow errant passes and punts. There I am. In my mother's arms, she carries me through the wrought iron gate and places me on the back steps of the big green house to wait for her. When she returns, her hair is silver. Her gait has slowed. No bag of lunch meat and sweet cereal. There is only a cane in her hand. And in the time it takes to reach her, the old house is blue. The marigolds, they grew, and the pine trees fell. Excuse me. So, one more poem that is trying to work out the grief. This is somehow. Somehow it was the chicken that made it real. Whenever someone dies, there is always fried chicken and little women in peach-colored church basements and flour-coated checker aprons. Only this time is different. This time, the chicken tastes like half-day kindergarten and the creases in my father's work pants. This time, the grease pops after the teardrops hit the skillet and the napkins wipe away the last bit of what it felt like to be a child. This time, the fruit baskets and the casseroles and pasta salads are for her, so my father won't have to cook. So there's plenty in the fridge when family comes to visit, but something tells me my pops would strangle, pluck, season, and fry every chicken on earth to have my mother back. So I fight back the 5-year-old that wants to hold his mother's hand. And I thank the man with the foil roasting pan for his kindness, and I grab a wing, and I sit in my mother's chair, and I slowly digest the reality. I wanted to read some lighter poems. My mother's still the central character. This is Popcorn Jesus. As a child, I had a chocolate allergy. I would break into hives every time I tried to have a little. I couldn't get away with it. Couldn't get away with sneaking it. My mother would look at my arms and inspect my small brown face, and she would say, "What have you been eating?" On Easter mornings, I would rise like a little beardless savior and walk down the plush green stairs to seek out the congregation of plastic grass. Wicker baskets. And I always knew which basket was mine, the popcorn bunny with the candy eyes and the bright spring orange or blue ribbon tied around its caramel-coated neck. This was for me. And the peeps and the plastic eggs filled with jelly beans or pastel mints and hard-boiled eggs we dipped in the colored vinegar water the night before. And all was joyous until my sister's resurrection, and with them the memory of things I could not have. And sometimes I would cry and say, "Jesus told a lie. He doesn't love me." I wanted chocolate bars and a chocolate bunny and little foil-wrapped chocolate eggs. What kind of Lamb of God would do this to a child? And my mother would see the sadness welling in my eyes, and she would hold me. And she would ask for a little bit of popcorn bunny, and she would say, "See how sweet caramel is." And sometimes my sister's bunnies were hollow, and the ones that were not had to be hacked with our kitchen knives, and always the chocolate was gone long before my popcorn bunny. Probably because I snuck a bite or two. Jesus always knew. So did my mother. All right. So after my mom's passed, we bought my uncle's house over on Front Street, looking over the water. So I got to thinking about him today, and I wanted to share his eulogy. This is my mother's brother, Ron. He was a cop for 30-some years, almost 40 years. He was an interesting character. Gruff, to say the least. This is I Know My Name Ain't Willis. First paid job. Working for Uncle Ron. It was a while back, so I don't remember exactly how old I was, but I knew when I was done I would never work for Uncle Ron again. I know my first name is Stephen. This was a Lifetime movie about a boy kidnapped and held so long, all he really remembered was his first name. That day with Uncle Ron started the same way. A pickup truck pulls up next to me. Driver says, "Get in." Camera pans in. My eyes say no. Camera angle changes. Wider frame. Passenger in the car. His eyes say, "Run away and take me with you." Get in the truck, Willis. Got something for you boys to do today. Something to do with your hands. Some real work. None of them video games, rap music, Tecmo Bowl, Big Daddy pimpin' stuff. I know my first name ain't Willis. I knew better than to get in that truck, but I was stuck. My cousin was riding shotgun, so contrary to every other fiber in my teenage being, I got in the truck. Stuck, just like my cousin. Let the guided tour begin. My Uncle Ron's rental homes, complete with spot checks and collection attempts. Hey, Manuel, what'd I tell you about grilling that goat by the porch? Move that goddamn barbecue away from my house. Hey, Leroy, you got my rent money? You know they got a warrant out on you. You better pay me before they lock you up. We drive up Parade Street. Two-story building, facade painted green, sometime during the 60s is my guess. We unload, at Unc's behest, the jingle of his keys, a menagerie of junk. Bits of wood and tires and pallets, pipes, doors, a car fender, window panes with no glass, picture frames with store-bought faces, boxes of clothes and books, and dust, and dust, and dust bunnies, and cobwebs everywhere, as if every spider that ever lived on Earth got it on at least once in Uncle Ron's building. Got some work for you boys. Take these gloves, you'll need 'em. I want you to take everything in this pile and move it over there. Stack it up neat. I want you to take everything in this corner and move it to that corner. Stack it up neat. I'll be back to check on you. And so we did as we were told, mostly because we thought Uncle Ron was crazy and mean. We moved this pile over here and that pile over there. We stacked it up as neat as we could. Of course it wasn't good enough. Of course we got yelled at when Uncle Ron got back, got called this and that and the other thing, crazy and mean. He paid us $20. And he gave us something to do with our hands. Something seemingly useless was his way of keeping us busy and safe and off the street and earning $1 and learning a day's work. His way. Decades later, upon his passing, I sit to write these poems. I can't help but laugh because I never did work for Uncle Ron again. No matter how much I could have used $20. His influence, though, has influenced every poem I've ever written. Something to do with my hands. All right. I shared a bunch of poems that are decades old. When I was asked to do this, I told myself I was going to sit down and write a poem. And I don't write much anymore. So the days went by. Next thing you know, Mother's Day is here, and I got my reading. And So I told myself I'm going to write a poem. So it's the best I could do. This is one last poem about my mother. This is my mother is. Mostly, she isn't. By that I mean she is empty spaces, empty chairs. These empty chairs my father watches over, vacant places where my mother isn't. My mother isn't there to walk this child, to rock this child, to watch this child become a man. To see her clan make vows, offer prayers at dinner. My mother isn't there, insisting dessert should come first. No rehearsed reasonings like I might pass in the middle of casserole and then I'd miss peach cobbler. Mostly, she isn't there. She isn't there to know the rose bush is overgrown, to know her snapdragons stopped coming back after that last rough winter passed. The peach iris patch was paved over. But you can still see the sunsets from the old brick porch where my father sits at night. Next to him, my mother is. Thank you guys. Thank you guys for listening.
Thank you, Cee. I really appreciate you sharing that work with us. So our next performance will be a duet performance between Katherine Liberovskaya and Al Margolis. So Katherine is a Canadian intermedia artist based in New York City. She's involved in experimental videos since the 1980s and has produced numerous single-channel video art pieces, video installations and performances, as well as works in other media that have been shown around the world. Since 2001, her work predominantly focuses on the intersection of moving image with sound and music in ephemeral and fixed forms, notably through collaborations with sound artists like Al today, in situations where her live visuals seek to create improvisatory music for the eyes. Al is an American sound artist, composer, and improviser, widely recognized as a key figure in the underground cassette culture of the 1980s. Working under the project name If Buana, and through his label Sound of Pig, Al focuses on electronic experimental music, vocal manipulations, and sound art. Great. So now we're going to have a discussion with Catherine and Al about the work that we've seen today and last night, as well as their work and collaborations in general. Before we continue, I do want to acknowledge that today's event is supported with grants from Erie Arts and Culture and mediaThe Foundation, Inc. So FEED is grateful for that support. So I wanted to start, Al and Catherine. Today's curator, Lisa Austin, asked me to, before the panel, give a sort of overview of what media art is for people who might not be familiar. And rather than me doing that myself, I'm curious if you could each say, like, what does the term mean to you, and do you consider yourselves media artists?
I guess I most definitely do and have considered myself a media artist since the 80s. Well, I guess in the 80s I would have called myself a video artist, but then from the 90s onward I would call myself a media artist because I was involved with all sorts of new media organizations, including in the early 90s, at the very beginning of the internet. I was involved in a women's media art collective who wanted to make sure that this new technology, potentially art form, would not once again be commandeered by men, as most technologies had been until then, including video, film, etc. And so then, since I was interested in that, obviously it wasn't just video, but media art. And I guess for me, media art is expressing oneself through different kinds of technologies, although the term media doesn't necessarily mean it's technological or electronic, but to me that's basically what it means. But I also am currently the artistic director of experimental intermedia, and intermedia is also something, and intermedia is also the mixing of, well, it could be any media. It could actually also be painting and drawing and poetry and dance and what have you. But also mainly, I guess, what people see as intermedia is mostly kind of performance, experimental music, film, video, slides, installation, and such. So, and Al is actually on the board of Experimental Intermedia and the label manager of Experimental Intermedia's label, XI Records.
Very true. But I do not actually consider myself a media artist. So a sound artist perhaps would be better description. So.
Great. So we saw you guys play together this afternoon and last night as well, and my understanding is that's a collaboration that's been going on for decades. Could you guys describe how you approach a performance like the one that you did today? Like, how planned out is it? Is it entirely open on the fly, or are you guys sharing material with each other beforehand? How do you generally approach these?
Well, we have been collaborating for a good 20 years. Our performances are generally improvisation, but sometimes there's
for instance, today, just Catherine said, "What are you starting with?" And I gave her some sounds that we were thinking of starting with, and that gave her something to think about to begin with. So, and that's actually how I approach even my playing. Is like, okay, where am I starting? And after that, I have no idea where it's going. And so, Catherine has some visuals that we've used over the years, and new things she's always popping in there. So, last night we had a little more thematic. We knew the pieces that we were going to, so that basically the first and last pieces had some pre-recorded material and live improv over it. The middle piece was completely improvised. So
that's on the sound side. I didn't know in advance.
Yes, exactly.
what I would do with the visuals, except that we discussed it, and Al knows a lot of my material, and I know a lot of his, and so the pieces yesterday, the two that had pre-recorded sounds from Al, we had already performed with. So we tried to remember what did we do before, but it's always new. Yeah, it's never exactly the same. But I guess it's similar. For example, when Al has all these materials and all of these objects and junk and all sorts of stuff, and I have many clips, and so it's a matter of deciding on the on the fly. Oh, that clip would go well with that sound, but we each have a collection of material.
Yes.
So, you just said, Catherine, that this clip might go with this sound, and Al, presumably you're making comparable decisions about sound matching images while you guys are playing together. Can you tell me how you might make a decision like that in performance? Like, is it about gesture? Is it about sort of tactility? Like, what makes an image align to a sound, or vice versa?
No, it's usually like just, oh, that would go well with that twirling thing, and I know that I've been asked this before, like how I like decide from one clip to another, and yeah, like sometimes it could be thematic if it's something figurative, sometimes it could be by color, sometimes it could be by composition, and I'll fade something of a similar composition into something of another similar composition, or a shape, or a color, but yeah, it's nothing. It's nothing. Yeah, it's intuitive.
Yeah, I think actually Catherine is more reactive to my work than I am to the video, partially because even over the years, so many performances, I'm sitting there and I cannot actually watch what's going on, so it's really hard to, like sitting at a table like this, I can actually watch what's happening. Sometimes we're in situations where, my back is to the video, so it's much more Catherine's reacting to sounds, and, I'm just giving what's out there, and, if I can look at something and go, oh, there's some, got some metal, I might go towards that, but again, a lot of times I don't have I cannot quite see what's going on, so it's, it's more her working on my sound, I think.
But yeah, and it's the case. I mean, I've collaborated in live performance with many people, and I would say that 80% of them will say, I couldn't look. Like either they're too busy because they have like too many pedals and devices and things, or because their back is to it, etc. But some have been really fun. Like one person I've loved to improvise with is Anthony Coleman, who plays piano or keyboards, and he doesn't need to look at his hands, so he can look at the screen directly. So that's a lot of fun. Or a violinist, Biljana Vučkova, who's been based in the U.S., but now she's based in Berlin, and she's Bulgarian. But another thing I just wanted to say about like what we do, so like aside from each having like a whole collection, like me of clips, Al of objects and things that make sound, plus we have like effects on top of that. So even and I have done performances where I use for half an hour the same 3 clips, but here I add a little feedback, there I add a little superimposition, and it just creates a huge variety from just 7 minutes of video.
Yeah.
And people do that with sound. I know people who have a lot of effects, and they do that too. Like maybe the sound is just like, I don't know, screeching something, and then you can amplify it, you can echo it, etc. So.
Yeah, you mentioned feedback just now, and what I think was really interesting about your performances, at least the ones that you guys have done here in FEED, is there's a sense of depth to them. By that I mean, Al, violin playing, if that's what you call it. We hear it's very hard panned, right? We hear something in the left speaker, we hear something in the right speaker. We also, those of us in the space, can hear what you're actually doing on the table, which is often not necessarily entirely correlated with what's coming out the speakers. So there's kind of this like three-dimensionality to it. And I think, Katherine, in the same way, you've got that in the video. There was a really nice moment in today's performance when Al's violin bow kind of crept in the sort of field of your camera and then fed back. So we're seeing
the image was it was a record, and I didn't. Did you see that? No, I had a feeling he didn't see it, and it was great, and he was too far from me to tell him.
So is that sense of depth something that you think is maybe unique to the setup that you're working with in this particular performance, or is that something that you guys strive for maybe in other contexts as well?
I think it's usual in what we do.
Yeah, because as you mentioned, like, I mean, I like as much as possible to include the ambient sounds, and even just, again, you can't hear it necessarily the live feed. A train goes by, when something goes by outside. I mean, that's for me all inclusive. So, Katherine, again, Catherine's video is, she's throwing stuff back into it, and again, the feedback is a lovely portion of it, and something I really like to see. And I wish I had seen that portion, but.
So you guys also mentioned material and being familiar with one another's material. Can you talk? Well, let me abstract it out a little bit. So we often think about traditional artists as having specific raw materials that they work with, right? A painter's working with paint on canvas, maybe a printmaker, ink on paper, a sculptor, a block of marble. What would you guys consider the raw material of your work? Is it as simple as sound and light, or is it something more specific than that? And how do you make decisions about choosing specific material, like spinny things or pine cones versus wire brushes?
Well, my material has just been gathered over, and one thing we should say, we've simply been working together for 20 plus years. We do have a number of videos, and in the past, when my work was more for live performance computer based, the pieces were a little more, there was improvised there too, but the material and the sound was different. And, so this is a bit newer for the two of us working in this format a bit, so that, so it's been, I'm not sure if it's a challenge for Katherine. This is what I've been doing in the last number of years, and so it's sort of, I mean, again, I start into some place, and then the choice of material then there live, I don't know where that's just something out of the head, but just anything that makes an interesting sound that you can amplify, or again, being heard in a room quietly is like, it's like if it doesn't make any sound, it's useless.
And for me, it's basically any clip of moving image that I find interesting. And I've been, so as I mentioned to you earlier, I have been working with video since like the second half of the 80s. And when I started doing live video, or I don't know, 99% of the images I use are my own. And so I started working with all the outtakes from the various projects I had worked on. Or things, for years I always carry a video camera with me, and sometimes I see, like a nice red ladybug on a beautiful yellow flower, and, if I think of it, I'll stop and I'll capture that, and that'll be a clip. And then I also, like, another system I have is I can do video with only live cameras, and so sometimes I've put objects in front of them, sometimes like things that were blown around by a fan or different things, or even the hands of musicians, or I've attached like surveillance cameras to the hands of musicians, like on the arm that bows a violin, etc. But yeah, otherwise it's really I mean, as you saw, there's a wide variety of stuff. So it's like anything that attracts my attention. And I used to be a painter before I started video, and then I wanted to make painting that moves, and so video was it, and I fell in love with it.
So, with regard to making images that move, you guys are well versed in a variety of technologies. Since both of your work goes back to the 1980s. So today, Catherine, you're using a jitter patch that you said that you had mapped out and planned out. That is based, I think, on an older video mixing setup. Could you tell us more about that, and then also like when you're performing, what's your relationship to the technology? Is it more like, say, the way Benton is currently using like video switching back there? Or is it more like, say, a concert violinist playing a violin?
Well, I always considered, like in video, that my tools were my instrument. But and you say today, but I always use that patch. So I started working on that patch when I first learned some Macs, and a lot of it was done with help by much more knowledgeable people, including Luc Dubois, who is one of the inventors of jitter. And but what I was telling you earlier is that and in those days, in the early 2000s, there were not many video mixing. There was not much video mixing software out there, like what Benton loves, like VDMX and stuff. It was just appearing. So when I wanted to conceive something for live video mixing, the model I thought of was like a video editing studio, because I had edited a lot of video in studios, and so I was telling Benton the other day that so the model was like a ABC roll editing studio, and an ABC roll editing studio is like, you have scope A, scope B, scope C, all in which you can put material via video cassette in those days, like Qmatic or Betacam. And then you have a mixer through which you mix between A and B, and so that's how I set it up. So I have like, I don't know if it was visible when I think Benton had one of the cameras pointed to my patch, and so like each one of them has like, so like my 3 scopes each have like a preview window in which I can like select which portion of a clip I want, and then like the sliders, the virtual sliders are like a mixer that mix between A and B and then B and C. So yeah, I transposed the logic of analog video into it because that made sense to me. And some of the software I've seen since is like a completely different way of thinking about it. But since I've been doing it for a long time, that made sense to me, and it works well.
Well, then Al, with regard to your work, do you consider yourself a violinist, or is your instrument more expansive? Is the violin on the table the instrument, or are the pine cones and brass mouthpieces and balloons and dowel rods all part of the instrument as well?
Okay, so I do not consider myself a violinist. I did take violin in junior high school and high school, though, and this is the result. It's so kids, do try that at home. I just tell people it's actually a sound object. So it's everything's part of the sound and everything's in the instrument, and so it's just another, it's a great amplifying thing, but it's just one among everything there. And I could play without the violin. I've done shows with like 2 contact mics. So everything's a piece, everything's a part of the sound, and so it's funny. I ended up, for a while, I was doing stuff with the violin more traditionally, and I started playing with first of all, I started playing with people who were really good violin players, and I gotta say they were happy to play with my lousy non-tuned stuff, but over a while I felt a little bit like, not that I was mocking them, wasn't mocking them, but it's like those guys can play, and I can't, and so let's just throw it on the table and make it something. And just going back a little bit to technology, one of the things I really like about doing things this way, because I used to go play a lot of times with the laptop, and I toured Europe a number of times where my laptop, every time I got to Europe, crapped out, so that I was carrying basically a doorstop and had a backup plan. If every string in that thing broke and all the technology went out, I can still make sound.
Yeah, and I wanted to say one more thing, like in relation to instrument. Another particularity about me, in any case, is that when I started video directly. Like a lot of people I know who are like of my generation who got into video, they were like prior to that they were maybe worked with film, and prior to that maybe with photography. Myself, it was directly video, and so to me also, like in the capture of images, a video camera is my instrument. And I've gone from big ones to little ones, but for example, that's how I knew the instrument. It's a one-handed instrument which has, an automatic zoom that works a little differently on each camera. But I never got into the DSLR cameras. And people I see who like those are people who were also involved in photography. I was involved in, like, I remember my first camera, what was I think it was a Nikon Fun Touch. You just snapped it. So I never got into that. And I'm often telling people, like, a video camera is my instrument. I mean, I do use a DSLR sometimes, but it's only because I have a bunch of personal video projects where it's that are durational, and it's a single frame for 30 minutes, and then I'll use a DSLR. But if I want to do anything else, it's an instrument, and it's really important that it be a camcorder.
You just mentioned, Catherine, moving from big cameras to small, and I feel like in both of your work there's a focus on smallness, or like maybe a better way to say it is like an active magnification. So in the video that we've seen from you, Catherine, the last couple of days, there's we're focusing on bumblebees, or today we were looking at, I don't know, it was like a hard drive spinning or something to that effect.
The inside of a VCR, one of them.
Okay, cool. And then Al, you're working with sounds that, were they not very significantly amplified, would be considered very, very soft sounds. I mean, sometimes it seems like you're just applying pressure to a string, not even necessarily plucking it. So what is it maybe about sort of making the microscopic that's of interest to you guys?
Well, for me, it's like I come from painting and drawing, and so it's not so much the microscopic. It's kind of finding the abstract in the figurative, and I like to capture details of reality where we forget what that reality is. That's what I find interesting. So it's not so much about magnifying, the microscopic as that, as, like, I have, I don't know, some images that I didn't use. Like, I don't know, one I remember everybody always asked me, what is that? And it was like, sorry, the light reflected from the water in a ship through a window, and it just like creates like an arched shape that shimmers, and and I love that. It's like it's things, it's details I couldn't invent if I was still painting, kind of.
Like, do you like to get into the detail of the microscopic, and it's almost amplified is bringing. I started doing a lot of this. Particularly, I remember I went on a tour with Walter Wright, who was supposed to be part of this at one point, and every place we played, everybody was so screamingly loud. You know, was the whole sort of noise circuit, and I just got so tired of having my ears blasted. Part of me just drifted into, let's make quiet sounds. You know, and as I got into it, you see the detail, and you can hear the details there. And so almost bringing it back to an amplified situation. And I do play with, you know, little amps usually when I'm playing live, so it's always going to be amplified. But, you know, I could also do this in the right situation completely acoustic. So this is almost an anomaly of like macroscoping back from the microscopic. But, it got very interesting as I got into the quiet, like what makes really good quiet sounds, and what, you know, and which thing can you grab, and what is like, you know, and that's a piece of foam. An amplified piece of foam like can make nice sound and little sound. So it's, you know, it's the details, you know, like I said, it's the gritty details in there, like that. It's fun to find, and what, you know, picking up something and going, oh, what is this, and we'll just make an interesting.
Plastic fork.
There are 3 plastic forks on that table, by the way, 3 different sizes. Thank you, fast food restaurants.
But also, I think I have like a similar story of how I began using the images I was using. Like, there was all these outtakes from various projects that I thought, oh, I can use them. But also, so much live visuals in the beginning. It was like really moving wallpaper that I got tired of, and especially like some of the commercial software to make live visuals out there, you know, they have like 50 effects, and you could just generate like swirls and things, and I got so tired of seeing that. And so like people who appreciate my work, that's what they appreciate, that it's completely different. And also in my patch, what's perhaps most special about it is that it has almost no effects. It has like zoom in, zoom out, flip backwards, forwards, top, bottom, feedback, which I do with a camera, and it's speed variation. That's about all I have. And then I have like a few little things I can add, some like blurs and some streaks and stuff, but almost nothing.
So, in thinking again, big picture, like back to the first question about like media art, you could make the case that so much media technology, whether it's video recording, sound recording, photography, is designed to perform some kind of documentary function, right? Like a photograph is meant to sort of help us remember things. Video cameras are designed to document specific events. Sound recording allows us to hear musicians that may have long since passed away. So what, if any, role does this sort of like documentary sense or memory role of media play in your works, or does it at all?
But just to your, I just wanted to add to your thought of documentary, but before documenting, I think a lot of the technology was meant for spying.
Of course, yeah.
I think of like all those clips. I don't think I feel like I'm documenting. I'm just, I feel like I'm collecting images and, live collaging them together so yeah, it's not. I mean, I've even worked and I've even done documentary stuff, but that's a whole other thing. Nothing to do with what's happening here. So, how about you?
Well, as for the memory portion of the question, depending, so for instance, between last night's performance and tonight's performance, I would try to do something completely different in the live, the completely improvised portion. I would actually be thinking of, okay, what did I do the night before, and try to start from, say, a different place. Or if I'm on a tour and I'm playing with the same people every night, it's sometimes to entertain myself and them is to start to. So basically, if I'm playing like 10 nights in a row with another group, it's like, okay, how can I entertain them? Because the audience might only be seeing me once, but how do I, do you want to play this? I mean, not that I could possibly do the same thing, but it's like, okay, here's where I ended last night. Let's start here, or, let's just let's go see what these guys think, or these other, the other groups think. And so, in terms of actually documentation, it's like I'm actually happy for like something like this where FEED's documenting, and because I can't be bothered anymore in terms of live performance, like throwing up be like everyone goes and they throw up their Zooms, and it's like, oh, I forgot to turn it on. So I don't even bother with that. It's like, it's just, and especially these days, you talked about media and documentation. It's like everyone's got a camera. Everyone's, you show, your clips will show up. I just assume something's going to show up, like a recording or a video of like what I did the night before, so I don't even have to bother. And then, I don't have to go home and listen to 10 nights of, tour recording. Which is this one better? Is this like...
No, and by the way, it's becoming a problem. Like, sitting on like 2 archives that are looking for homes, and right now, so Phil Niblock's an experimental intermedia, and just before COVID, New York Public Library was willing to take both Phil Niblock's and experimental intermedia, and Phil Niblock was delighted about that. And then COVID came, and everything, and we even had an event inviting important patrons of the New York Public Library, announcing this. And then COVID came, and everything slowed down. And while it slowed down, the curator of contemporary music was replaced. His boss was replaced. Now there's new people, and now it's all changed. And now, for example, we've been talking to the new curator, who's great, who loves our work no less than the previous one. But now they've changed all of their regulations, and they're saying, everybody has media now. And so now, rather than saying we will take it all or whatever, they keep saying, well, we have to come with a media person, and they have to evaluate how much work your archive represents. Because experimental intermedia, we have, how many years of every concert is documented in audio, and then starting from the 80s on video. I mean, that's hours and hours and hours of stuff, Phil Niblock too, I mean, it's less stuff. And so the more documentation is happening, I think the more and more of a problem it is, and so I kind of feel like it's great that only sometimes is it, recently I was invited somewhere, and someone came across a video documentation of something I did in Italy with Phil, and I didn't know it existed, and it was great, and I was like glad that there was not. That's a good one, and if I die and Phil has already died, that's a really good one. We don't need 1,000 of them, but more and more people are obsessed with that. It's all the endless selfies, and sometimes I wonder why. Well, selfies, I understand. They want to say, okay, here I am in front of the Eiffel Tower, but then you see all these tourists taking photos of the classic touristic monuments, and I think you can buy a little booklet for $1 from or just find them online, made by professional photographers who do that really well, who captured it in the best light at the best time of day. Why? Anyway.
So, with regard to that idea of the tools of documentation being everywhere, and you had hinted, Catherine, earlier about how these technologies may have their origin in spying, and now one could make the case that that's they've sort of, I don't know, returned home to their primary function, that we have so much media technology now that is used for surveillance, either explicitly like a Ring camera or a flock camera, or implicitly like Instagram and Facebook sort of surveilling what people look at and then convert data to be sold. What is I'm not exactly sure how to frame this question. What is maybe the role of or responsibility of media art if we're using the same tools that are maybe used for maybe some might say nefarious purposes? Like what is our function as artists in being in proximity to those devices? Or Al, you're welcome to answer this as well.
I guess subverting it as much as possible, or just being outside. My sound's not. Though I always do think that, like, instead when they were trying to get Noriega out, instead of like blasting him with like whatever, they should have just blasted him with Days of Mertzbau, and he'd have been out in a week. So. Yeah, I'm not really sure. Just do what you do, and remain on the outside and try not to give them any extra stuff.
And again, like when I'm performing, I guess I'm just totally not thinking it. It's just another material. Like it could be acrylics, it could be plasticine, it could be it's a material. So.
Or we could just thank them for giving us our tools to do our work, and then go on with our lives.
So, with regard to the tools to do our work, Al, you're often cited as an important figure in cassette culture. And for those of viewers who may be too young to understand what that is, can you tell us what cassette culture is, and how does a particular technology or medium, the audio cassette, how does that influence a culture or a set of cultural practices?
Well, the cassette culture, to use that term, I suppose, the cassette underground was started, I guess, in the mid '80s, early '80s, and the cassettes became pretty. Everyone started having cassette decks, and then with little cassette things, and then with the cassette decks, and then it became even recording devices. I had a 4-track cassette and a recorder, and they started making dubbing decks, so that particularly if you were not a major artist, you could basically you could do at home, make music and distribute it on your own as like 1 copy, 3 copies. It was pretty much sort of like a Xerox machine. I mean, it's like just making copies, and you could communicate. The thing was, you could communicate, and this is also, it started all pre-internet, so that any communication you did with people was often by letters and mail, so you could communicate directly with another person, and they could hear your music, and it had nothing to do whatsoever with commerciality. No one gave a damn about this kind of stuff, and so it's spread out. It's continued. It's grown. It's in the '80s. It went. Then it sort of dropped off, and then at least from my involvement with it, and then as they tried to bury the cassettes, they went away for a long time, and then CDRs kind of came as a technology for that. But cassettes are back, and you run a label. There's many people running a label, and again, it's as much about. Well, it's a little different than it was back then, just because of some of the technology. Like I could make, my cassette label ran for, 10 years, 8 years, and I probably dubbed by hand in real time 10,000 cassettes over that time. And I had multiple cassette decks running constantly, and you can't do that now because it's hard to get tapes and cassette decks. But I think it was a way of communicating. So it was a pre-internet internet. So I think it's, I don't know if it's influenced anything in the internet culture, but it's certainly, it's just that communication, direct communication.
Yeah, maybe I would call it like networking with birds of a feather. That's kind of.
I was in thinking about cultural memory and its relationship to the technologies that we use now versus then. It occurred to me that and I'm not a cognitive scientist by any stretch of the imagination, but based on my layperson understanding, when our brains actually remember something, we're really remembering the last time we remembered it. And so every memory is a memory of a memory of a memory. And that's how memories can sort of become changed or distorted over time. And it makes me think about analog technology like VHS tapes or cassette tapes, where when you make a copy, there's more tape hiss on the second copy than there is on the original, or more.
Generation loss is called.
Exactly. Yeah. So in a way, it seems like those technologies almost worked kind of the way our biology does. There's this imprinting, there's this residue as things are as regenerated over time, and that's not an issue that we have with digital technology. So I'm wondering if as you guys have used different tools over your career, do you feel that your relationship to the work that you make with different technologies, whether it's as abstract as analog versus digital, or as specific as jitter versus some other software, do you feel like they're causing you to work in different ways?
Yes. At least in when I was working on cassette tapes, you could and or when I got to reel for a long time, it was if I had recorded something and I wasn't happy, I'd screw with it and mess with it and try to make it right. And this is just a small example, but in digital, it's like, and it didn't work, delete. And it's a lot simpler. When you're working with tape, whether it was because of the cost or just the energy involved, it was it was a lot harder to get something out. And and I would know I would play with it way longer than these days. It's kind of like, yeah, that didn't work. Delete it and start again. And so there's a level where simplicity, I suppose, or just maybe it makes you, I don't know if it's lazier, because that's not right word, but it's instead of just futzing, it's like, okay, blah, it's funny because it's about the digital hiss in the brain, or just the brain and the generation loss. My generation loss is any answer I gave you today is probably going to be completely wrong. From someone will go, oh, that didn't happen.
Yeah, and there's other ways too. For example, something that has been infuriating me since it's happened is how it was decided that the video format would change from 4:3, which is a fantastic format, to 16:9, which is a great format for landscape, and it comes from cinema, and it comes from sitting in a movie theater and having the impression that the image wraps around you, and I've been looking now for years. Maybe Benton knows. I would like to have a digital camera that can shoot either 16:9 or SD, so 4:3, and they do not exist. They do? A camcorder? Okay. But anyway, so there's these impositions, and then the other thing that also bothers me a lot is how all technology now is going to more and more definition, and then it's goes to 4K and 10K, and so all of that takes up more space, and I don't even think it really looks better. 3/4 of the images I used there, they were shot with SD, and they were digitized at extremely low resolution, because I was doing that, in 2003 or 4, and they look they look no worse than if I had the newest DSLR. So so it's forcing us in those ways, and it's hard to not use it, or now you need special software to lower resolution. And then on the other hand, it's ridiculous, because now all the cameras are going 4K, 10K, but say all the festivals that show films, they want 1 gigabyte maximum, or 2, or they want MP4. So yeah, great, So and then if you want to put it up on Vimeo, they want you to scale it down. So it's kind of ridiculous. And sound too is going to 96.
Oh, I don't even worry about that stuff. But the one thing I was going to say is that what's interesting is also that, from tape lasts longer. The backup, all the backups you have to do to protect your material now is I mean, I don't know how many hard drives you have to like double and triple that like something doesn't go away where, you know, my cassettes still play and I still have reel-to-reel tapes, which, on one hand, I'm never going to mix them again. On the other hand, it's like, don't throw them out. So it's like, but the digital's going to go away. If you don't back something up, you've lost something and it's gone. So it's also a bit of that, I keep telling people that we're going to still have more music from 1900 on than from 2000, to 2000 because someone didn't back something up. The digital crashed, the cloud died, it's rained.
Yeah. Film, like celluloid film it's still well preserved unless it burns.
So,
Or some of the stock fades. But.
So with regard to the insights that you guys just presented about how working with tape is different, or the sort of the advantages of 4:3 or lower resolution, if you were speaking to an early career artist, say someone in their late teens, early 20s, is there a method of working or a particular approach that you would recommend they pursue that maybe today's technology maybe discourages them from pursuing?
Well, one thing I have to say for myself, because I started video in the 80s, and at the time, or the format I started with, or there were formats before that, was U-matic, and those were most typically 20-minute cassettes, and they cost like $30 or $40. And so I had this discipline of like not shooting too much. And now, everything you can shoot endlessly. And actually, yesterday we were speaking to Nathan, and he was saying they had like hundreds of hours of footage, And I still, like, if I'm working on a precise project, I'll do like what's called like 5:1 or 6:1, and it just helps. It makes life easier, Like limitations are often very conducive to creativity. So, I mean, that's one piece of advice I have.
I would just say use what you got and use what you like, and not worry too much about, if you want to use, I know people recording on cassette still, and and people going, complete computer digital. So whatever gets you to doing what you need to do, because it's not how you do it, it's your end result and getting what you want. So, if you do it on Scotch tape, go for it, man.
And especially in our world, the world where Al and I perform, for example, there is no, you can do what you want. Of course, if, say, you want to make work for television, then there are, television standards, and it's all about, how to get a signal to transmit, so there's a necessity there. But otherwise, yeah, just whatever you want to do.
Okay, so you mentioned the circles that you all perform in. I think since you guys have a long history of touring and probably moving between very DIY spaces and very sort of institutional spaces, do either of you have any memories or memories of a performance that went catastrophically wrong?
I don't want to mention a name, but yes, I was playing at a show up in Kingston, New York, and it was a small space, and was invited to play with a guitarist, and it just, it was just not, it was just musically, like, I'm just sitting there the entire, and I think I usually, even if something's not quite working, I'm pretty good at, like, just, I didn't screw up nothing, but I'm not sure I could cover my face in that one. It was just like, there were 3 audience members, like, who were basically the other group, and it was just, the crappiest performance I can ever remember. But, that was just, I'm not sure if that's a disaster, but it was like, I'm still sometimes cringe at thinking about that night, and so.
Well, I mean, yeah, so at that level, disastrous, yes. Like, for example, Al and I, we often will play with an ensemble of people, or sometimes it's a bunch of improvisers. So something really catastrophic is when one performer is absolutely not listening to the others and just does their own thing and plays over and plays louder, and it just ignores everything happening. So that's one catastrophic situation. And then, of course, then in the technological world, there's all of these other things that can go wrong. A projector that doesn't work, a cable that doesn't work, et cetera, et cetera. Or I guess some of the really bad ones I remember is just like stuff going wrong until the last minute. And so then you don't have time for a proper sound check or image check. And then audience comes and you start and it's wrong and you just have to like make do with, and you sit there and cringe, so.
Thank you for that. I often find the problematic concerts are the ones we learn the most from, so I always like to ask about that. So I guess to wrap up.
From them, we learn to have like backup stuff. Like, for example, I did a lot of stuff, with live cameras, like as I mentioned earlier, for example, attaching wired surveillance cameras to like the bowing arm of a musician and stuff. And because I've seen that go wrong, usually during, sound check or rehearsal, I would always capture some images and have the clips just in case. So if they step on it and get unplugged, I still have, material that looks like it might actually be what's supposed to be happening, for example.
So most of what I've asked you guys about is like looking back and memory and things like that. But you guys are still practicing and have a very active practice, the both of you as a duo and individually. What is something that you're maybe most excited about to continue exploring in your work, or to start exploring, or anything on the horizon that you feel is, just particularly that you're excited to pursue?
Well, I've been painting a lot lately, so actually continuing painting is one of the main things. But otherwise, just trying to take this further. And what I like to do a lot of times is take the instruments I have. I think the way I describe it is taking instruments I have and playing them rightly or rightly wrong. So I have some ideas I'm working on, like in thinking about going, just I haven't gotten to. It's been really busy the first 6 months of the year so far. So it's been just continuing on and just making more weird sounds that don't work right or don't sound right. So,
well, for myself, it's just really getting back to my work. I just spent the last 5 years caring for my partner, Phil Niblock, who was almost 30 years older than me, and then my mom, and actually it was interesting that Cee's poems, because I just lost my mom about 3 weeks ago. She just turned 95, so it was very moving to hear his poetry. And so because of that, I haven't had much time to work on any projects, and I'm just looking forward to getting back to projects. I have like a whole other like installation practice where I work with video and audio. Well, I mean, I have a whole body of work that's like video and audio that makes itself without AI. I don't know, it's like feedback processes and stuff like that. I'd like to get back to that, and just getting back to, because of all this caring I had to do. Otherwise, in my life, I've done a lot of residencies where I've created work, and I haven't applied for any residencies, so I'm looking forward to get back to that, and more touring. I didn't do any long touring, also because in case I needed to be back for any emergencies and stuff. So yeah, just looking forward to getting back to an artist's life rather than a caregiver's life.
Great. And then before we wrap up, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask Lisa or Benton, is there anything you would like to ask these two folks? Where's the next stop?
Cleveland.
Cleveland.
Tomorrow night. Erie Arts Cafe.
Say the name of the space again?
Yeah. It's the Waterloo Arts Cafe in Cleveland. So if you're nearby.
And the series is called Mouse. No.
No, it's we're playing with Mousetronic, Bob Drake's Buto sound group. So should be fun.
Come on down.
All right. Well, thank you guys both for your time and for your work. It's been really wonderful talking with you, and I'll be excited to see where your work takes you next.
And thank you, Ethan. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Benton. Thank you, FEED. And thank you, all the funders who enabled us to be here.
Absolutely. And thank you guys for tuning into liveFEED today, and follow FEED to see future performances, talks, panels, and things of that nature.